Dr. Catherine Wilson smirked as she falsely diagnosed yet another healthy patient with cancer, her bank account growing with each unnecessary treatment she prescribed. Meanwhile, Jake Bennett, skilled conman with a mysterious past, posed as a lab technician, secretly collecting evidence of her horrific medical fraud that had subjected hundreds of innocent people to poisonous chemotherapy they never needed. Will Jake's dangerous undercover mission expose Catherine's deadly scheme before more lives are destroyed? Or will his own criminal history be discovered first? If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts on this tale of an unlikely hero in the comments below, and help us spread this powerful story of a conman becoming the savior no one expected. The badge scanner beeped as Jake Bennett swiped his newly minted hospital ID in, and no one had questioned his credentials yet. Amazing what proper letterhead and a few well-placed references could accomplish. As he entered the pathology lab, Jake nodded at the night technician, covering for Davis. He's got that stomach bug going around. The technician barely looked up. Badge works? You're good. I'm heading to the cafeteria. Back in 20 perfect. Jake slipped on latex gloves and moved swiftly to the computer terminal. He had 20 minutes to access Dr. Catherine Wilson's recent pathology reports. The oncologist's diagnosis rate had tripled over the past year, statistically impossible. Unless something was very wrong. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security with practiced ease. He'd spent years perfecting his craft, though never for a cause like this. His mind drifted to his mother's hospital room a year earlier, her frail hand in his as Dr. Wilson delivered the grave news. Stage 4 lymphoma. We need to start aggressive treatment immediately. His mother had trusted her completely. They all had. Jake photographed files with his modified phone, careful to leave everything as he found it. He'd learned that lesson years ago, during a casino carnival. Leave Evans a notification popped up on the screen. Dr. Wilson's priority patients. Jake clicked, revealing a separate list of patients flagged for accelerated treatment protocols. The timestamp caught his eye. 3 new diagnoses today alone. 3 more lives about to be derailed by treatments they didn't need. Jake's jaw tightened. He'd been labeled a criminal his entire adult life, but he'd never done anything this monstrous. This wasn't just theft, it was torture for profit. He heard footsteps approaching and quickly closed the files, switching to routine lab work as the technician returned. Everything good? The man asked. Jake nodded, heart racing beneath his calm exterior. Just finishing up some cultures, nothing exciting. Later, in his sparse apartment, Jake pinned new photos to the evidence wall he'd constructed behind a sliding closet door. Dozens of patients, hundreds of falsified reports, millions in insurance claims and pharmaceutical kickbacks. His phone buzzed with a text from the hospital scheduling system. Dr. Wilson had scheduled 3 new biopsies for tomorrow. Jake stared at his mother's photo on his nightstand. I'm going to stop her, Mom, he whispered, no matter what it takes. He just needed more evidence enough to make the case bulletproof. Because when you go after someone like Catherine Wilson, Wolfie connected and respected, you only get one shot. And Jake Bennett couldn't afford to miss. Jake arranged the slides methodically, establishing his cover as the diligent new lab tech while keeping an eye on the pathology lab door. 3 weeks in, and the statistical anomalies in Westlake Memorial's oncology department were becoming impossible to ignore. Dr. Catherine Wilson's diagnosis rate wasn't just high, it defied medical probability. Need a hand with those? Jake turned to find Nurse Sarah Chen watching him with curious eyes. She'd been friendly since his first day, but something in her expression suggested more than casual interest. I'm good, thanks, Jake replied, careful to seem appreciative but not overly eager for conversation. Sarah lingered. You're thorough. Not like our last temp. She leaned against the counter. Noticed you've been reviewing Dr. Wilson's cases. Jake's pulse quickened. Just being detailed. It's strange, isn't it? Sarah lowered her voice. The cancer clusters in her practice. Jake measured his response carefully. I'm not sure I follow. Come on, Sarah whispered. Her diagnosis rate is 3 times the national average. Either she's the world's most talented oncologist, or she let the implication hang. Or, Jake prompted, testing waters. Never mind, forget I said anything. Sarah straightened, professional mask back in place. We should grab coffee sometime. I've been here 5 years, know all the hospital gossip. After she left, Jake considered this unexpected development. An ally could be valuable or dangerous. Trust wasn't a luxury he could afford. Later that afternoon, Jake witnessed something that confirmed his suspicions. From the supply closet near Catherine's office, he overheard her conversation with Dr. Patel, a young oncologist who had recently joined the practice. I'm just suggesting we run additional tests, Patel was saying. The initial biopsy findings were inconclusive at best. Are you questioning my diagnosis? Catherine's voice turned glacial. Not questioning, just following standard protocol. Let me make something clear, Catherine interrupted. I built this department. My diagnosis standards have been published in leading medical journals. If you find yourself unable to support my treatment plans, perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere. The threat hung in the air. No, of course not, Patel backpedaled. I apologize for overstepping. Jake slipped away before they emerged, but the exchange told him everything. Catherine wasn't just falsifying results, she was actively silencing anyone who questioned her. That evening, Jake added Dr. Patel to his mental list of potential witnesses. Along with Nurse Sarah, the case against Catherine was growing, but he needed irrefutable proof before he could act. As he left the hospital, Jake noticed Catherine stepping into her Mercedes, laughing on her phone. Rage flared in his chest as he thought of his mother's final months, the needless suffering, the false hope, the financial ruin. Soon, Dr. Wilson, soon you'll answer for everything. Jake placed fresh flowers at his mother's grave, the cold marble reflecting the overcast sky. 1 year gone, Eleanor Bennett, beloved teacher, devoted mother, victim of medical fraud. I'm close, Mom, he whispered. She won't hurt anyone else when I'm done. Jake's mind flooded with memories, his mother's confusion at the diagnosis, her brave smile as chemotherapy ravaged her body, the hope in her eyes when Catherine Wilson promised cutting-edge treatments for additional fees their insurance wouldn't cover. We're seeing remarkable results with this protocol, Catherine had said, her diamond earrings catching the light as she showed them graphs, Jake later learned, were manipulated. His mother had cashed in her retirement fund, sold her house. It's worth it if it gives me more time with my son, she'd insisted. But the treatments weren't cutting edge, they were unnecessary torture. By the time Jake discovered Catherine's pattern of fraudulent diagnoses, his mother was too weak to fight. She died believing she'd lost a battle with cancer she never actually had. The funeral flowers had barely wilted when Jake began planning his infiltration. He'd spent years as a confidence man, using his talents to separate the wealthy from their money through elaborate schemes. Those skills would now serve justice. Back at his apartment, Jake reviewed his evidence wall. He'd discovered Catherine's connection to BioNova Pharmaceuticals, a company that paid consulting fees to doctors who prescribed their treatments. Catherine's offshore account had received over $2 million in the past year alone. Phone buzzed a text from Nurse Sarah. Patient files you requested are ready for review. Lab 3, 8 p.m. Jake had carefully cultivated Sarah's trust, presenting himself as a whistleblower rather than revealing his personal vendetta. She believed they were building a case to present to the hospital board. Jake had different plans. At precisely 8 p.m., Jake entered Lab 3. Sarah had left a stack of files with a sticky note. Had to cover these show pattern going back 3 years. Jake photographed everything, then carefully returned the files to their exact positions. As he turned to leave, the door opened. Working late, Bennett, Dr. Richards, the lab director, stood in the doorway. Just finishing cultures for tomorrow, Jake replied smoothly. Richards frowned. Security said your badge accessed oncology records earlier. That's not your department. Dr. Wilson requested rush results. Jake lied. Didn't want to make her wait. Richards seemed satisfied, but Jake knew his window was narrowing. Security was noticing his movements. He needed to accelerate his timeline. On his way out, Jake passed the oncology ward. Through the window of room 412, he saw an elderly woman receiving chemotherapy, her gaunt face reminiscent of his mother's. The patient file outside her door read Margaret Weber. Jake checked his phone. Margaret was on Catherine's priority treatment list. Another innocent victim, another life being destroyed for profit. Jake's resolve hardened. Catherine Wilson would pay, no matter the cost. Jake's apartment walls were now a spider's web of connections, patient names linked to treatment protocols, insurance claims, and pharmaceutical payments. 5 weeks of meticulous investigation had revealed a pattern so methodical it made his blood run cold. Dr. Catherine Wilson didn't select patients randomly. She targeted those with premium insurance policies or substantial assets. The elderly were frequent victims, often widows and widowers with retirement funds and children too busy to question complex medical decisions. Jake added another photo to his wall. Margaret Weber, 72, retired librarian, diagnosed with lymphoma. Last week, scheduled for Catherine's accelerated protocol, starting tomorrow. The same protocol that had killed his mother. Jake circled Margaret's name in red. Something about her had gotten under his skin, perhaps her quiet dignity, or the worn novel always in her hands. During treatments, maybe it was how she reminded him of his mother, right down to the silver locket she never removed. His burner phone rang. Nurse Sarah. Jake, I've been cross-referencing those lab results like you suggested. 15 of Dr. Wilson's last 20 diagnoses show inconsistencies. The original slides don't match the reported findings. Can you get me copies? Jake asked. Already did. But Jake, there's more. Dr. Wilson is fast-tracking Margaret Weber for the clinical trial. The one with the BioNova drug. Jake's fist clenched. The trial pays per patient, right? $30,000 each. Plus, the hospital gets prestige points for participating in groundbreaking research. After hanging up, Jake paced his small apartment. Tomorrow, Margaret would begin treatments that would systematically destroy her healthy cells while Catherine collected her blood money. He could anonymously report his findings, but investigations took time. By then, Margaret would be weeks into unnecessary chemotherapy. Jake pulled up Margaret's file on his laptop. Unlike most patients, she had no family contacts listed, no one to advocate for her. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. With a few keystrokes, he could flag her file for secondary review, delay the treatment, but that would alert Catherine, jeopardize the entire operation. Jake slammed his laptop shut. The con artist in him knew better. Never break character. Never risk the bigger score for immediate satisfaction. But this wasn't a con anymore. These were lives. Jake grabbed his hospital badge. He would visit Margaret tonight, find some way to warn her without revealing his identity. If he could convince just one person to demand additional testing, As he reached for his jacket, his phone buzzed with a hospital alert. Notice. Security protocols updated. All staff IDs subject to biometric verification, effective immediately. Jake froze. The hospital was tightening security. Was it routine, or had someone noticed his activities? Either way, his window was closing. Every day he gathered evidence meant more patients suffering, but moving too soon meant Catherine might escape justice entirely. Jake stared at Margaret's photo on his evidence wall. Tomorrow, poison would begin flowing into her veins for a disease she didn't have. "I'm sorry," he whispered, both to Margaret and to his mother's memory. The greater good demanded patience, but that knowledge did nothing to ease his conscience. "Mr. Bennett, a word, please." Jake turned to face Hospital Administrator Vance, a man whose perpetual frown seemed carved into his face. 6 weeks into his infiltration, and the first real challenge arrives. "Of course, sir." Jake followed him to a small office, mentally reviewing his cover story. Vance shuffled through papers. Routine background verification. "Your previous employer, Mercy General in Phoenix, they have no record of you." Jake had anticipated this. "That's concerning. I worked the night shift in their lab for 3 years. He pulled out his phone. "I still have my supervisor's contact information if that helps. Dr. Simmons preferred texts, but she'll verify." Vance seemed mollified by Jake's calm response. "That would be helpful. HR is just being thorough with our new security protocols." "Completely understandable," Jake replied, sending a text to a burner phone that would respond with pre-programmed messages from the fictional Dr. Simmons. As Vance turned to his computer, Jake noticed a memo on his desk. "Oncology Department Review Confidential." "I won't keep you any longer," Jake said, standing. "I'll have Dr. Simmons contact HR directly." Walking back to the lab, Jake's mind raced. The hospital was conducting an oncology review. Had someone else noticed Catherine's suspicious patterns? Was his cover about to be blown? Rounding the corner, he nearly collided with Catherine Wilson herself. "Ah, the new lab technician," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Bennett, isn't it?" "Yes, Dr. Wilson. An honor to meet you properly." Catherine studied him with clinical detachment. "I've noticed you've been handling many of my patients' samples." Jake maintained eye contact. "I try to be thorough, especially with oncology cases." "Admirable, though I've had to correct several of your preliminary readings." A trap. Jake knew his analyses were flawless. She was testing him. "I appreciate the feedback, Doctor. Still learning the specific protocols here." Catherine's phone chimed. As she checked it, Jake glimpsed a text. "Offshore transfer complete. Keep up the good work," Catherine said dismissively. Walking away, Jake needed a diversion, something to redirect attention from his background check and Catherine's growing suspicion. He found his opportunity that afternoon when a lab refrigerator malfunctioned. While helping to salvage samples, Jake accidentally knocked over a tray of non-critical cultures. The resulting chaos decontamination procedures, incident reports, inventory checks consumed the department's attention. By day's end, Jake's background verification had been pushed to the bottom of HR's priority list. That night, he accessed the hospital's financial system through Catherine's terminal. She had forgotten to log out in her haste to attend a charity. Galawa, rookie mistake. Jake hadn't expected from someone so careful. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Regular payments from offshore accounts to Catherine's private foundation, which then distributed funds to her personal accounts as administrative expenses. The charity gala she was attending tonight, a Bionova Pharmaceuticals fundraiser. Jake photographed everything, then carefully logged out. As he turned to leave, he noticed a framed photo on Catherine's desk. Catherine shaking hands with the hospital board chairman, both smiling at a charity event. The web of protection around her was strong, but every web had weak points. Jake just needed to find Catherine's before she found him. Alina Diaz deleted another anonymous tip from her inbox with a sigh. 8 years as an investigative journalist had taught her one thing: people with real information rarely reached out through official channels. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Westlake Memorial Hospital. Oncology fraud. Hundreds of victims. Evidence ready. Another day, another vague tip. Still, healthcare fraud was her specialty. She texted back, specific allegations. Source credentials. The response came minutes later. Dr. Catherine Wilson diagnosing healthy patients with cancer for insurance and pharmaceutical kickbacks. Source inside hospital. Meeting terms negotiable. Alina sat up straighter. Catherine Wilson wasn't just any doctor, she was medical royalty. with a foundation that funded research across the country. Accusing her would require irrefutable evidence. Neat, more than allegations, proved 3 minutes later. Her phone buzzed again, an encrypted file link. Alina clicked it cautiously, watching as lab reports and financial documents filled her screen. She recognized the pattern immediately from previous investigations. Falsified pathology reports paired with treatment authorizations, followed by insurance payments and corresponding offshore transfers. If genuine, this was the biggest medical fraud case she'd seen in years. Verification, she texted. Cross-reference patient names with treatment protocols. Check BioNova clinical trial payments. Follow the money. Alina considered her options. Her newspaper had been burned by false whistleblowers before, but these documents had enough detail to warrant investigation. Why anonymous? Why me? Not anonymous to you, just to them. You covered the Riverside Hospital fraud case. You understand? Medical corruption. Meeting tomorrow, public place. Details to follow. Across town, Jake deleted the conversation from his burner phone. Involving a journalist was risky, but necessary. His evidence needed a platform, and Alina Diaz had the reputation and resources to verify his claims independently. The next morning, Jake monitored the hospital entrance while appearing to catalog supply deliveries. A woman with a press badge interviewed a nurse at the visitor's entrance. Alina, working faster than he'd anticipated. His phone buzzed. Testing. Your information. Preliminary checks show promise. Still need face-to-face. Central Park. Chess tables. 6 p.m. Jake texted back confirmation. Then noticed Dr. Catherine Wilson watching the journalist from her office window, expression unreadable. Afternoon, Catherine called an emergency staff meeting. It's come to my attention that a reporter has been asking questions about our oncology practices, she announced, scanning the faces of her staff. If approached, direct all inquiries to hospital administration. Our work is too important to be disrupted by sensationalist journalism. Her gaze lingered on Jake for a fraction too long. Remember, patient confidentiality is paramount. Breaking it carries severe consequences. The threat was clear. Catherine suspected a leak but didn't know the source yet. As the meeting dispersed, Jake overheard Catherine instructing her assistant, "Get me everything on Alina Diaz. And review all staff badges, access to patient records in the last month." Time was running out. Jake needed to convince Alina to publish quickly, before Catherine identified him. As he left the hospital that evening, a text arrived from an unknown number. Meeting cancelled. Too risky. Sending alternative contact method. Jake froze. He hadn't cancelled anything, which meant Catherine had already found Alina and was now setting a trap for her whistleblower. 5 new patients this week, all fast-tracked for the clinical trial. Nurse Sarah's voice was tight with controlled anger as she passed Jake a coffee in the hospital cafeteria. It's accelerating. Jake nodded grimly. Catherine was increasing her pace, likely in response to Alina's inquiries. The journalist had been persistent despite the cancelled meeting, sending a junior reporter to interview hospital staff about innovative cancer treatments. How's Margaret Weber doing? Jake asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah's expression darkened. 3 rounds of chemo already. She's lost 15 pounds. Can barely keep food down. Keeps asking why the treatments are hitting her so hard. Jake's knuckles whitened around his cup. Margaret was suffering for a disease she didn't have, just like his mother. I found something else, Sarah continued, sliding a hospital badge across the table. Security access to all departments. My roommate works in IT. Don't ask how I got it. Jake pocketed the badge. I never do. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. Dr. Wilson is reviewing all lab tech's credentials, starting with those who've handled her patients' samples. Jake thanked her and headed directly to pathology. With Sarah's special access badge, he could reach restricted archives containing original tissue samples. He located Margaret Weber's biopsy slides and several others from Catherine's recent diet. Even to his trained eye, the samples showed no signs of cancer. Jake photographed everything, then accessed the modified digital versions in the hospital database, the ones showing clear malignancies. The technical skill required to falsify these results was impressive. Catherine wasn't working alone. His phone vibrated. A text from Alina Diaz. Confirmed pharmaceutical kickbacks. BioNova pays consulting fees to oncologists enrolling patients in trials. Wilson received $1.2 million last year. Meeting today? Same place? 5 p.m. Jake responded affirmatively, then noticed a notification on the lab computer. System access review underway. All user activity being monitored. They were watching. Jake needed to cover his tracks. He carefully returned to his assigned station, making sure to document routine work that would appear normal in the activity logs. As his shift ended, Jake passed Catherine's office. Through the partially open door, he saw her reviewing security footage with the head of hospital security. These timestamps, Catherine was saying, pointing at the screen. Someone accessed the archives at 2 a.m. on these dates. The security head nodded. Badge records show it was night maintenance, but we're verifying that now. Jake kept walking, maintaining his pace. His night access had been discovered, but they hadn't identified him yet. In the parking garage, Jake noticed a black sedan with tinted windows. The same car had been parked outside his apartment building yesterday. He was being followed. Instead of heading to his meeting with Elena, Jake drove to a shopping mall, losing his tail through the crowded parking structure before taking a taxi to the park. Elena was waiting at the chess tables, pretending to read a newspaper. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Had to take precautions." "We're being watched," Elena nodded. "My editor received a call from the hospital board chairman this morning. Pressure to kill the story. They're offering exclusive coverage of their new cancer center instead. Are you still running it? I need one thing. First, your name. On the record." Jake hesitated. "That complicates things. This story accuses a nationally renowned doctor of medical fraud, without a named source. It's dead in the water." Before Jake could respond, his phone buzzed with an alert from the hospital scheduling system. Catherine had just added 3 more patients to her treatment list. 3 more victims who didn't have time for journalistic ethics. "Check your email," Jake said, making his decision. "You'll find everything you need, including my statement." As Elena opened her laptop, Jake glanced at the hospital visible in the distance. In its windows, he could see the reflections of the setting sun and Catherine Wilson's office lights still burning bright. "You understand what you're looking at?" Jake asked as Elena scrolled through his evidence on her laptop. "Enough to know. It's explosive." Elena's eyes widened at Catherine's offshore account statements. "If this holds up, it's criminal fraud, medical malpractice, possibly manslaughter." "It'll hold up," Jake assured her, checking his surroundings for the 3rd time. In 5 minutes, the chess players nearby provided good cover, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "My source verification takes time," Elena warned, "especially for something this sensitive. 1 week, minimum." "These patients don't have a week," Jake countered. "Catherine's accelerating her diagnoses." Elena closed her laptop. "I need to talk to some of these patients, especially this Margaret Weber." "Absolutely not. Catherine's watching them closely." "Then I need more about you, why this matters personally." Jake hesitated, then pulled out his wallet, removing a worn photo of his mother, Eleanor Bennett, Catherine's patient last year, diagnosed with lymphoma, underwent 6 months of treatments, died from complications of chemotherapy for a cancer she never had. Elena studied the photo. "I'm sorry, but this creates a conflict. Your personal vendetta weakens the story." "It's not about revenge," Jake insisted. "It's about stopping her before more people die." As they debated, Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Nurse Sarah. "Wilson hired private investigator, asking questions about night lab techs." Jake stood abruptly. "We need to wrap this up. They're closing in." "I need 72 hours, Elena said, "to verify independently and prepare the story." "You have 48, Jake replied, walking away. "After that, I'm taking everything to the medical board directly." At his apartment, Jake noticed immediately someone had been there. Nothing obvious was disturbed, but the hair he'd placed on his door frame was gone, and his laptop had been moved slightly. They knew who he was. Jake grabbed his evidence backup and essential documents, then left without packing. His car would be watched, so he took public transportation to a motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash. The next morning, Jake called in sick to the hospital. He needed to accelerate his timeline. From the motel, he monitored hospital communications. Through his remote access to their systems, Catherine had scheduled an unusual number of patient consultations, delivering bad news to more innocent people. His burner phone rang an unknown number. "Mr. Bennett?" Catherine Wilson's voice was smooth as silk. "I believe we should talk." Jake's blood ran cold. "Dr. Wilson, how did you get this number?" "The same way I know you've been accessing confidential records, photographing patient files, and meeting with a journalist." Her tone remained pleasant. "You're making a serious mistake based on incomplete information." "I have complete information," Jake replied, "including your offshore accounts and falsified lab results. Such accusations could ruin a promising career in laboratory science." "Is it, though your actual expertise seems to be in confidence?" "Schemes." She knew his background. Jake gripped the phone tighter. "Here's my offer," Catherine continued. $100,000, cash, you disappear, delete your evidence, end communication with Elena Diaz. In return, I don't press charges for identity fraud, corporate espionage, and medical record theft. You're bribing me to allow you to keep poisoning innocent people. I'm offering a business arrangement between professionals. We both know what you really are, Mr. Bennett." Jake thought of his mother, of Margaret Weber, of hundreds of others. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "You do know what I am, which means you should be very afraid right now." He ended the call, knowing he'd just accelerated the confrontation. Catherine would come after him with everything she had. The hunt was on. The oncology ward was quiet when Jake slipped in, using Sarah's security badge. Visiting hours had ended, but he needed to see Margaret Weber's condition for himself. Room 412 was dim, illuminated only by the glow of monitoring equipment. Margaret lay sleeping, oxygen tubes in her nostrils, for dripping chemicals she didn't need into her fragile veins. Her skin had the gray pallor Jake remembered all too well from his mother's final weeks. "Who are you?" Margaret's eyes fluttered open, her voice barely audible. Jake froze. He hadn't planned on her waking. "Just checking your monitors, ma'am." Margaret studied him with surprising alertness. "You're not my usual technician, covering the night shift," Jake replied, adjusting her for as if performing routine maintenance. "Something's wrong with me," Margaret whispered. "They said the treatment would make me tired, but this feels ... double quotes." She trailed off, searching for words. "Different," Jake suggested, guilt crushing his chest. Margaret nodded weakly. "Like I'm being poisoned, but Dr. Wilson says that's normal." Her thin fingers clutched at the blanket. "I don't understand why it's happening so fast." Every professional instinct screamed at Jake to maintain his cover, to say nothing that might jeopardize his operation. But looking at Margaret, this kind woman, suffering needlessly, something broke inside him. "Have you considered getting a second opinion?" he asked, voice low. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "Dr. Wilson said that would delay treatment. That every day counts." "Sometimes," Jake hesitated, then committed. "Sometimes it's worth being certain." "You know something," Margaret said, her gaze suddenly sharp despite her weakness. "About my treatment." Before Jake could respond, monitors began beeping rapidly. Margaret's blood pressure was dropping. Jake hit the emergency call button, medical training overriding everything else. "Stay with me, Margaret." The door burst open, as a night nurse rushed in. "What's happening?" "Who are she's crashing?" Jake interrupted. "Adverse reaction to the chemo." Everything blurred into emergency protocols. The crash team arrived. Jake stepped back, watching helplessly as they stabilized Margaret. 4 medications, oxygen adjusted, quiet medical commands. "She's stable," the doctor announced finally. "But we're moving her to ICU for monitoring." As they wheeled Margaret out, her eyes found Jake's. In that moment, he knew she understood something was deeply wrong with her treatment. Jake slipped away during the commotion, but the night's events had changed everything. This wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore. People were dying right now while he built his case. The next morning, Elena Diaz's preliminary article appeared online. Questions raised about cancer diagnosis rates at prestigious hospital. No names named, but enough to start the whispers. The hospital board called an emergency meeting. Jake watched from the lab as Catherine strode purposefully to the conference room, her white coat impeccable, expression confident. 2 hours later, she emerged victorious. Hospital administrators gathered staff to announce full confidence in Dr. Wilson's pioneering treatments and warn against irresponsible journalism. That afternoon, Jake received 2 messages almost simultaneously. From Elena: "Board killed. The story editor won't publish without more evidence. Hospital threatening legal action." From Sarah: "Margaret Weber coded twice last night. They've moved her to comfort care. Family contacted, they're discontinuing treatment. I'm sorry." Jake's phone clattered to the floor. He'd failed. Just like he'd failed his mother. That night, security cameras captured Jake Bennett entering the hospital after hours, badge in hand, determination in his eyes. No more waiting, no more evidence gathering. It ended tonight. Liquidate everything and transfer to the Conman account. Catherine's voice was controlled despite the urgency of her instructions. By tomorrow morning, her financial advisor cleared his throat nervously. "That's over $4 million. Dr. Wilson. Moving that quickly will trigger flags." "I don't care about flags. I care about timing." After ending the call, Catherine methodically shredded documents from her home office safe. The preliminary article hadn't named her, but it was only a matter of time. Bennett had more evidence than she'd initially believed. Her phone buzzed, a text from her contact at the hospital board. Reporters still asking questions. Staff talking. "Contain this now." Catherine had weathered investigations before. The key was always the same. Control the narrative, eliminate evidence, and, if necessary, disappear until things quieted down. Her reputation and connections had protected her for years. But Bennett was different. He wasn't seeking professional acclaim or a settlement. His mother had been her patient. This was personal for him. Catherine booked a one-way first-class ticket to Grand Cayman, departing tomorrow evening. Just a contingency. With luck, she wouldn't need it. Across town, Jake paced his motel room. Elena wasn't answering his calls after the hospital's legal threats. Sarah had been removed from Margaret's case, likely Catherine's doing. His carefully constructed plan was unraveling. His laptop pinged with an alert from the tracking software he'd installed on the hospital's network. Catherine was accessing the secure servers, deleting files. Jake hacked into the system, racing to recover and duplicate records before they vanished permanently. Bit by bit, he reconstructed the evidence, patient histories, falsified test results, treatment protocols. Hess found Rangelina, finally returning his call. "They're burying it," she said without preamble. Hospital issued a statement, praising Wilson's exceptional diagnosis rate and innovative treatments. "My editor's killing the story? She's destroying evidence right now," Jake countered. "And planning to run. I've tracked financial movements, travel arrangements." "How exactly did you track those things?" Elena asked sharply. Jake hesitated. "You don't want to know." Actually, I do. Because it sounds like you're hacking systems, which makes any evidence you gather inadmissible, and puts my reporting at risk. This isn't about a story anymore, Jake said. Margaret Weber is dying. Others will follow. We're out of time for journalistic ethics. Elena was silent for a moment. I need to meet your source inside the hospital, Nurse Sarah. I need collaboration. From someone who hasn't broken laws, gathering evidence? Not possible. Catherine's watching her. Then I can't help you, Jake. I'm sorry. After she hung up, Jake stared at the wall of evidence he'd recreated in his motel room, photos of patients, medical records, financial transactions, all pointing to Catherine Wilson's guilt, all useless without a legitimate platform. Jake's laptop chimed with another alert. Catherine had booked a flight to Grand Cayman. Departing tomorrow at 9 p.m., she was running. If Catherine left the country, she'd escape with millions while her victims continued suffering. Margaret Weber wouldn't live to see justice. Neither had his mother. Jake pulled up the hospital's security protocols on his laptop. Catherine would be working late tonight, destroying final evidence. The building would be largely empty. One last chance to confront her, to force a confession. To end this, Jake packed his evidence into a secure drive, then checked his watch. 3 hours until Catherine typically arrived at her office to work after dinner. 3 hours to prepare for the most important con of his life, convincing a sociopath to reveal the truth. Catherine's office was dark except for the desk lamp illuminating the documents she methodically fed into a portable shredder. Security had assured her the building was empty, aside from minimal night staff, perfect for eliminating troublesome paper trails. Working late, Dr. Wilson? Catherine startled, nearly knocking over her shredder as Jake Bennett stepped from the "Shoutouts, Mr. Bennett. Bold of you to show your face after our conversation." Her hand moved subtly toward her desk drawer. Looking for this, Jake held up her cell phone. "You really should use a stronger password than your medical license number." Catherine's expression hardened. "Breaking and entering now?" Adding to "Your impressive criminal resume." "We both have impressive criminal resumes," Jake replied, setting a flash drive on her desk. "Mine's just more honest about it. Security will be here in minutes." "No, they won't. Your usual guard is handling an alarm on the 5th floor. Faulty wiring, apparently." Catherine leaned back, assessing him with clinical detachment. "What do you want, Bennett? More money?" "I can double my offer. I want you to confess." Jake gestured to the flash drive. "That contains everything. Patient records, lab results, both the originals and your modified versions, financial transfers, your first-class ticket to Grand Cayman tomorrow night." Catherine didn't flinch. "Illegally obtained evidence. Inadmissible. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm the son of a woman you murdered for profit." Jake's voice remained steady despite the rage churning inside him. "Eleanor Bennett, you diagnosed her with lymphoma last year. She sold her home to pay for treatments she didn't need. Died believing she'd lost a battle with cancer she never had." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes, not remorse, but recognition. "I remember her unremarkable case. Textbook response to treatment. Textbook response to being poisoned," Jake corrected. "Just like Margaret Weber now. And hundreds of others." Catherine smiled thinly. "You've built quite a conspiracy theory, but let's talk about who you really are." She opened a folder on her desk. "Jacob Bennett. 3 convictions for fraud. Specialized in elaborate confidence schemes. Served 14 months in Arizona State Prison." "I never killed anyone," Jake replied. "Never caused suffering for profit." "No. You targeted retirees in your Canyon Vista investment scam. How many elderly victims lost their savings?" Jake flinched. His past wasn't clean, but he'd changed. "The difference between us," he said quietly, "is that I can still feel shame." Catherine laughed. "Shame doesn't build medical centers or fund research. Results do. My diagnosis rate has made Westlake Memorial a leading cancer treatment facility. The board doesn't care about methods, only outcomes. And the dead patients, the lives destroyed, the families bankrupted, collateral damage and medical advancement." Catherine stood, suddenly confident. "You have nothing, Bennett. No reputable journalists will touch your story with your criminal background. No court will accept your illegally obtained evidence." She stepped closer. "Your mother was dying anyway, perhaps not of cancer, but she was old, weak. I simply monetized her inevitable decline." The calculated cruelty staggered Jake. In that moment, he understood Catherine completely. She didn't see patients as people, only as commodities. "You're recording this, aren't you?" Catherine smiled, seeing his expression. Amateur move. She reached for her desk phone. "Security, this is Dr. Wilson. Intruder in my office." As she spoke, Jake noticed movement in the doorway behind her. Hospital security would arrive any moment. "It's over, Bennett," Catherine said, triumph in her voice. "I've already won." Jake backed toward the window, weighing his dwindling options. He'd gambled everything on this confrontation and lost. The security alarm began to wail throughout the building. Jake sprinted through the hospital's service corridors. Security alarms blaring overhead. Catherine's words echoed in his mind. "Your mother was dying anyway. I simply monetized her inevitable decline." The service exit loomed ahead, then crashed open as 2 security guards appeared. Jake pivoted, darting down a side hallway and into a supply closet. Footsteps thundered past as he controlled his breathing. His phone vibrated, a text from Sarah. What did you do? Whole hospital on lockdown. He didn't respond. Couldn't risk compromising her too. When the corridor quieted, Jake slipped out and navigated to an unused emergency stairwell, descending to the basement parking garage. His stolen ID badge still worked on the service doors. They hadn't locked him out of the system yet. Outside, Jake disappeared into the night, making his way through back alleys until he reached a 24-hour diner 10 blocks from the hospital. He ordered coffee with shaking hands and assessed his situation. Catherine had outmaneuvered him. She'd be gone by tomorrow night, millions of dollars richer, while Jake faced potential arrest for breaking into her office. His criminal record would undermine any accusations. His phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Is this Bennett? Alina Diaz's voice was terse. How did you get this number? Sarah gave it to me. What were you thinking confronting Wilson alone? Jake laughed bitterly. I was thinking she's leaving the country tomorrow and taking evidence with her. Meet me at the Parkside Motel, room 112. 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead before Jake could respond. 90 minutes later, after taking precautions to ensure he wasn't followed, Jake knocked on the motel room door. Alina opened it, looking exhausted. You're late. Had to be careful. Jake stepped inside, then froze. Nurse Sarah Chen sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. What is she doing here? Jake demanded. Building a case that might actually hold up, Alina replied, closing the door. Unlike your vigilante approach, Sarah stood. Catherine's in damage control mode. Hospital security is searching for you. She's telling everyone you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations. She admitted everything, Jake said, in her office. Called patients collateral damage. Did you record it? Alina asked. Jake's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Alina gestured to her laptop. Sarah's been documenting everything for months. Patient records, treatment discrepancies, pharmaceutical payments, all obtained through proper channels. And it wasn't enough, Jake countered. The hospital board shut you down anyway, because we didn't have someone with direct experience of Wilson's fraud, Alina explained. Someone willing to go on record. That's where you come in, Sarah added. Your mother's case. Your testimony. Jake laughed harshly. My testimony? The convicted con artist. Catherine already made sure everyone knows about my record. Alina nodded. Which is why we need to address it head-on. Full disclosure about your past, your mother's death, why you infiltrated the hospital, the complete story, including the laws I broke, getting evidence, the systems I hacked. We focus on what Sarah obtained legally, Alina said. Your role is humanizing the story, showing the personal impact of Wilson's fraud. Jake paced the small room. Even if you publish, Catherine's leaving tomorrow night. She'll be gone before any investigation starts. Not if we move fast enough, Sarah said. I've contacted 2 other nurses with concerns. They're willing to speak up, and I've reached out to other patients, families, Alina added. We're building a coalition of witnesses. But we need you, Jake. Your story is what makes people care. Jake stared at the wall, considering his original plan had failed spectacularly, but perhaps there was another way. I'm a criminal, he said finally. That's what Catherine will say, and she'll be right. You're also a son who watched his mother die needlessly, Alina replied. That matters more. Jake turned to them. If I do this, if I go public, there's no going back. I'll likely face charges. Justice isn't always clean, Sarah said quietly. Sometimes it requires sacrifice. Jake thought of Margaret Weber, of his mother, of hundreds of others, of Catherine Wilson boarding a plane to escape consequences. All right, he said finally. Let's take her down together. 6 nurses, 2 lab technicians, and a radiologist, Sarah announced. Updating the whiteboard in Elena's makeshift command center, they'd relocated to a suite at the Westside Hotel, away from prying eyes. All willing to testify about irregularities in Dr. Wilson's diagnoses. Alina nodded approvingly. And I've got 4 patient families on board, including the Thorntons, whose father died 3 months ago after Wilson's accelerated protocol. Jake studied the growing network map. In just 24 hours, they'd assembled an impressive coalition of witnesses. But something was missing. We need someone from inside Wilson's inner circle, he said. Someone who knows how the diagnoses were falsified. Dr. Patel, Sarah suggested. The oncologist who questioned her methods. Catherine threatened his career, but he might talk. Too risky to approach directly, Alina cut on. If he alerts Wilson, He won't, Jake said, remembering the young doctor's expression when Catherine had intimidated him. He's scared, not complicit. 3 hours later, Dr. Patel sat nervously in their hotel suite, reviewing patient files. I suspected something was wrong, he admitted. The diagnosis rate was statistically impossible, but questioning Dr. Wilson, He shuddered. She threatened to ruin my career. Said no hospital would hire me once she was finished. But you kept records, Jake prompted, nodding to the flash drive Patel had brought. Insurance. I documented every case where my assessment differed from hers. Patel's hands trembled slightly. She altered biopsy results, changed imaging reports. The lab director helped her ease her breath. The missing piece clicked into place. Catherine hadn't worked alone. Will you testify, Elena asked? On the record. Patel hesitated. What about my career? You'll be a whistleblower who saved lives, Sarah said gently. That counts for something. Eventually, Patel agreed. By evening, Elena had filed her story, a comprehensive expose detailing Catherine's systematic fraud, supported by testimony from hospital staff and patient families. The newspaper's legal team had vetted every word, bolstered by Dr. Patel's impeccable credentials and documentation. It publishes at midnight, Elena announced. Front page, digital and print. What about Catherine's flight? Jake asked. She leaves at 9 tomorrow. I've contacted the medical board and state licensing authority, Elena replied. They're launching emergency reviews based on our evidence. Not fast enough, Jake insisted. Bureaucracy moves slowly. Catherine moves fast. Sarah's phone buzzed. She read the message. Face, Pauling. The hospital board called an emergency meeting. Catherine convinced them to issue a preemptive statement supporting her and condemning defamatory reporting. They're closing ranks, Elena realized. Jake stared out the window toward the hospital visible in the distance. They think their reputation is worth more than lives. A knock interrupted them. A hotel employee delivered a large envelope for Elena. Inside were documents from Catherine's attorney Sanders' letter threatening legal action against the newspaper. Elena personally, and all sources involved in the false and defamatory story. She's trying to scare us off, Elena said, but her voice wavered. Jake's phone chimed with a hospital alert. Catherine had scheduled 3 new patient consultations for early tomorrow, before her flight. 3 more victims. We need to accelerate, Jake decided. Sarah, can the nurses stage a walkout? Force immediate attention. Sarah made several calls. They're willing, but administration will just bring in replacements. What about patients? Elena suggested. A demonstration. Too scattered, too sick, Jake said, frustration mounting. Dr. Patel, who had been quiet, finally spoke. There's a hospital board meeting tomorrow morning. I'm supposed to present quarterly oncology statistics. Everyone turned to him. What if, he said slowly, instead of the approved numbers, I present the real ones. Breaking news from Westlake Memorial Hospital, where renowned oncologist Dr. Catherine Wilson has filed defamation lawsuits against the Tribune and several hospital employees, alleging a coordinated smear campaign against her groundbreaking CANCER treatment protocols. Jake muted the television in their hotel suite. Catherine had moved faster than anticipated, launching a full media counteroffensive before Elena's story even published. She's controlling the narrative, Elena said grimly, typing rapidly on her laptop. My editor's getting nervous. The legal department wants more time to review. We don't have more time, Jake reminded her. She's leaving tonight. Sarah entered, looking worried. It's worse. Catherine's claiming a disgruntled ex-con with a vendetta against her orchestrated everything. She's named you, Jake. Jake wasn't surprised. What exactly is she saying? That you're Jacob Bennett, convicted fraudster who targeted elderly victims, that your mother was her patient but died of complications unrelated to treatment, that you blame her and infiltrated the hospital seeking revenge. She's not wrong, Jake admitted. About my past, at least. She's painting you as unreliable and unstable, Sarah continued. Says you manipulated hospital staff with a convincing sob story. Elena's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened. They're pulling the story, she announced after hanging up. The publisher won't risk the lawsuit. They want more corroboration before proceeding. The room fell silent. What about Dr. Patel's evidence? Jake asked. They say it's not enough without more institutional backing. They're afraid of taking on someone with Catherine's connections. Jake paced the room. So Catherine smears me, threatens legal action, and everyone backs down. What about the patients? Welcome to corporate journalism, Elena said bitterly. Truth matters less than liability. Jake's phone buzzed with a news alert. Hospital board issues statement of full support for Dr. Catherine Wilson. Condemns irresponsible journalism and disgruntled ex-employees' vendetta. The board meeting had been moved up. Dr. Patel's presentation canceled. They're circling the wagons, Sarah observed. Protecting the institution over patients. Jake stared at his phone, rage building. His criminal past, the very skills that had allowed him to uncover Catherine's scheme now, undermined their entire case. Maybe Catherine's right, he said quietly. Maybe I am just seeking revenge. This isn't about you anymore, Elena reminded him. It's about Margaret Weber, your mother, hundreds of others. Jake nodded, determination returning. We need to bypass traditional channels, go directly to patients and families. How? Sarah asked. Catherine's controlling all official communications. Social media, Elena suggested. Direct testimonials from families and staff. Too scattered, Jake countered. We need something undeniable, something Catherine can't dismiss or explain away. His phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Bennett. The voice was weak but determined. This is Margaret Weber. Nurse Sarah told me how to reach you. Jake put the call on speaker. Margaret, you should be resting. Not much time for that now, she replied with surprising clarity. I know what's happening to me. What Dr. Wilson did. How are you feeling? Sarah asked gently. Like I'm dying of chemotherapy for a cancer I don't have. Margaret answered dryly. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I've requested my complete medical records. Hope flickered in Jake. And the hospital is processing my request. Indefinitely, it seems. Margaret's voice hardened. I taught high school for 40 years. Mr. Bennett, I know when someone's lying to me. I want to help you stop her. Jake exchanged glances with Alina and Sarah. It's dangerous. Margaret. Catherine's powerful. I'm dying anyway. Margaret replied simply. Might as well make it count. As they discussed possibilities, Jake's phone buzzed with another alert. Criminal background of hospital. Whistleblower raises questions about allegations against prominent oncologist. Catherine's counterattack was working. With Jake's credibility undermined, their entire case was crumbling. They needed a new approach fast. There has to be a smoking gun, Jake insisted, studying the evidence wall they'd created in the hotel. Sweet. Something even Catherine can't explain away. 8 hours until Catherine's flight? The coalition they'd built was fracturing under pressure. 2 nurses had withdrawn their statements. Fearing for their jobs, Dr. Patel was being investigated for professional misconduct. Elena's newspaper had officially killed the story. Her personal records, Sarah suggested. Catherine keeps detailed notes on everything. Already checked her office, Jake reminded her. She's been shredding documents for days. Alina looked up from her laptop. What about her home? People like Catherine often keep backup records. Jake considered this too risky. She'll have security systems, possibly private guards now. My cousin works for her landscaping service, Sarah said suddenly. They're scheduled for maintenance today. Jake's eyes lit up. Can you reach him? An hour later, Jake was wearing a landscaping company uniform, riding in a maintenance truck, approaching Catherine's lakeside mansion. Stay in the back gardens, Sarah's cousin instructed. The security cameras have blind spots there. You have 30 minutes while we work the front. Jake moved efficiently, locating an unlocked window in Catherine's sunroom. Inside the house was immaculate and coldly impersonal. No family photos, no personal touches. Just expensive art and sterile modern furniture. Jake headed straight for Catherine's home office. The main desk contained nothing useful. Catherine was too careful for that. But people like her always kept backups. Insurance against partners who might betray them. He searched methodically, checking for hidden compartments, false bottoms, in drawers, loose floorboards, nothing. 20 minutes gone. Jake expanded his search, moving to Catherine's bedroom. The wall safe behind an abstract painting was expected, but required a combination he didn't have. Jake pressed his ear against it, attempting to manipulate the dial. But modern safes were designed to prevent such techniques. 5 minutes remaining. Jake stepped back, reconsidering. Catherine was calculating, meticulous. Where would she hide? Critical information? His gaze fell on a medical textbook on her nightstand. Oncological Diagnostics, 4th edition. Catherine's own book, her name prominent on the cover. Jake flipped through it, noticing handwritten notes in the margins. Then he saw it a USB drive flattened and disguised as a bookmark. He pocketed it and headed for the window. As he reached the sunroom, he heard the front door open. Just checking my flight details. Catherine's voice carried from the entryway. Then we can head to the airport. My bags are already in the car. She'd arrived home early. Jake froze, trapped between the sunroom and the hallway where Catherine stood talking to someone, likely her driver. I'll be in my office for 5 minutes, Catherine continued. Then we're leaving. Footsteps approached. Jake pressed himself against the wall, options dwindling. The only exit was past the office. Catherine was about to enter. The footsteps stopped. Wait, Catherine called to her driver. Did you let the landscapers in the back? I specifically said front gardens only. Jake heard her changing direction, coming toward the sunroom. Nowhere to hide. He made a split-second decision and moved toward the hallway, directly into Catherine's path. Their eyes met in mutual shock. You, Catherine hissed, reaching for her phone. Jake held up the USB drive. Looking for this. Catherine lunged for it. Jake sidestepped, but she was surprisingly fast, clawing at his hand. Give me that, you pathetic fraud, she snarled. All professional composure vanished. They struggled. Catherine's driver appeared in the hallway, moving to intercept Jake. He's stealing patient data, Catherine shouted. Stop him. Jake broke free, sprinting for the front door. The driver pursued, but stumbled over a decorative table. Outside, Jake raced toward the maintenance truck just as it was pulling away. He leaped into the back, Catherine emerging from the house behind him, face contorted with rage. You're dead, Bennett, she screamed as the truck accelerated. You hear me? Dead in the hotel room. They connected the USB drive to Elena's laptop. It contained everything, complete records of Catherine's scheme going back 5 years. Patient lists, falsified, results, payment records, even a tracking system for conversion rates of diagnoses to treatments. Most damning were the notes Catherine kept on which patients were most profitable and least likely to seek second opinions. "This is it," Alina whispered. The smoking gun. Jake nodded grimly. "Now we need to use it before she disappears." The airport departure lounge hummed with activity as Catherine Wilson checked her watch. 2 hours until her flight to Grand Cayman. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from the hospital board. Her attorney colleagues all could wait until she was safely beyond extradition. The USB drive's theft was concerning but manageable. Bennett couldn't possibly decrypt the files in time, and without context, the data would seem innocuous. She'd built plausible explanations for everything. Catherine scrolled through flight status updates, then froze as breaking news flashed across. The terminal television, medical fraud exposed, renowned oncologists accused of diagnosing healthy patients with cancer. The camera cut to Alina Diaz standing outside Westlake Memorial. Sources have provided extensive documentation showing Dr. Catherine Wilson systematically falsified cancer diagnoses for financial gain, subjecting hundreds of healthy patients to unnecessary treatments. Catherine's phone exploded with notifications. Every major news outlet was picking up the story. Alina had bypassed her newspaper, releasing everything directly to television and online media, cursing under her breath. Catherine headed for the international departures security line. If she could just get on the plane, ... double quotes, Dr. Wilson. She turned to find two serious-looking individuals in suits approaching, badges extended. "FBI, we need you to come with us." "This is absurd," Catherine protested as they escorted her to a private room. "I'm being smeared by a convicted criminal with a vendetta against me." "We're aware of Mr. Bennett's background," the female agent replied coolly. "We're also aware of the encrypted files on your USB drive, which our technicians have now accessed." Catherine's composure slipped. "That's private patient data. Confidential, yes. Particularly the spreadsheet tracking your investment returns. On each falsely diagnosed patient," the agent's expression hardened, "or your notes on which elderly patients were easy targets unlikely to seek second opinions." Outside the airport, Jake watched from Elena's car as Catherine was let out in handcuffs. After 5 years of inflicting suffering for profit, after his mother's needless death, after Margaret Weber's ongoing battle, finally, Catherine Wilson would face consequences. "They're taking her to federal holding," Alina explained, ending a call with her law enforcement contact. "Multiple charges, fraud, racketeering, practicing medicine with criminal intent." "Will it stick?" Jake asked, still cautious after so many setbacks. "The evidence is overwhelming," Alina assured him. "Your USB drive contents, combined with Dr. Patel's documentation and Margaret Weber's testimony, she can't escape this." At the hospital, chaos reigned. News crews surrounded the entrance. The board had called an emergency meeting. Distancing themselves from Catherine, Dr. Patel was reinstated, tasked with reviewing all of Catherine's patients' diagnoses. Nurse Sarah texted updates throughout the day. The lab director, Catherine's brother-in-law, had been suspended. Patient families were flooding the switchboard, demanding information. Margaret Weber had been moved to palliative care, her treatments discontinued. That evening, Jake watched the hospital's hastily organized press conference. The board chairman, ashen-faced, announced a comprehensive review of all oncology protocols and full cooperation with authorities. Without explicitly admitting fault, the hospital promised financial assistance for Catherine's victims and their families. Later, in Margaret Weber's hospital room, Jake finally introduced himself properly. "So you're the con man who caught the doctor," Margaret said, her voice weak but her eyes sharp. "Poetic justice. I wish we'd caught her sooner," Jake replied, taking her frail hand. "Don't," Margaret said firmly. "Regret is useless. What matters is you stopped her." "We stopped her," Jake corrected. "Your courage made the difference." Margaret smiled slightly. "Will you be arrested too, for your ... unorthodox methods?" Jake nodded. "Probably. I've broken several laws getting the evidence." "Worth it?" Jake thought of his mother. Of hundreds of patients like Margaret who would now receive proper care instead of poisonous treatments. Absolutely worth it. When Jake left the hospital that night, federal agents were waiting beside his car. "Jacob Bennett," one said, approaching with handcuffs. "You're under arrest for computer fraud, identity theft, and breaking and entering." Jake offered his wrists without resistance. He'd known this moment was coming. As they led him to their vehicle, hospital staff gathered at the entrance, watched in silence. Then, one by one, they began to applaud. Justice, Jake reflected as the car pulled away, came in many forms. 6 months later, Jake straightened his tie as he entered the federal courthouse. The gallery was packed. Journalists, former patients, hospital staff, all gathered for Catherine Wilson's sentencing. Catherine sat at the defense table, still elegant despite her circumstances. She'd maintained her innocence throughout the trial, portraying herself as a pioneering doctor whose aggressive treatment protocols had been misunderstood. The jury hadn't believed her. After 4 weeks of damning testimony from patients, medical experts, and hospital staff, they'd convicted her on all counts. 37 charges of fraud, practicing medicine with criminal intent, and racketeering. Took his seat beside Alina, who nodded in greeting. Their relationship had evolved from reluctant allies to something approaching friendship. Her coverage of Catherine's crimes had earned her a Pulitzer nomination. Nervous? She asked quietly. Just ready for it to be over, Jake replied. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. After preliminary remarks, he addressed Catherine directly. Dr. Wilson, your actions represent the most profound betrayal of the doctor-patient relationship this court has ever witnessed. You falsified diagnoses, subjected healthy individuals to toxic treatments, and profited from their suffering. Catherine stared straight ahead, expressionless. The court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison, without possibility of parole for 15 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to all affected patients and their families. The gavel fell with finality. As Catherine was led away, she locked eyes with Jake briefly, her gaze still defiant, unrepentant. Outside the courthouse, Margaret Weber waited in a wheelchair, recovered from the unnecessary treatments, but permanently weakened. She'd become the public face of Catherine's victims, testifying powerfully despite her frailty. Justice at last, she said as Jake approached, though no sentence could truly match her crimes. What happens now? Jake asked. The Catherine Wilson Patient Advocacy Foundation launches next month, Margaret explained, using funds from the hospital settlement to help victims and promote diagnostic oversight protocols. Jake nodded approvingly. Out of tragedy, something positive had emerged. And what about you, Mr. Bennett? Margaret asked. Your sentencing is tomorrow, isn't it? Jake nodded. Despite his cooperation and testimony being crucial to Catherine's conviction, he still faced charges for his methods. My attorney says 3 to 5 years, potentially reduced for cooperation. Better than I deserve. Nonsense, Margaret said firmly. Sometimes the system needs someone willing to break it to expose its flaws. Later that day, Jake visited his mother's grave, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. It's done, Mom, he said quietly. She can't hurt anyone else. The next morning, Jake stood before the same judge who had sentenced Catherine. He'd pleaded guilty to reduced charges of computer fraud and identity theft. Mr. Bennett, the judge began, this court finds itself in an unusual position. Your actions were unquestionably illegal. However, they also unquestionably saved lives. Jake waited, prepared for imprisonment. In light of extraordinary circumstances and your extensive cooperation, this court sentences you to 5 years probation and 1,000 hours of community service. Murmurs swept the courtroom. Jake stood stunned as the judge continued. Your community service will be fulfilled by working with hospital systems to develop security protocols preventing the type of fraud you uncovered. Your unique perspective should prove valuable. Outside the courthouse, Alina waited with unexpected news. Similar pattern detected at Metro General in Chicago, she said without preamble. Another oncologist with suspiciously high diagnosis rates. Jake shook his head. I'm on probation, Alina. My con days are over. Who said anything about cons? Alina countered. I'm talking about consulting, legitimately using your skills to help identify fraud patterns. Jake considered this unexpected turn, using his past to prevent future Catherine Wilsons, a chance to transform his skills from weapons of deception into tools for protection. As they walked away from the courthouse, Jake glanced back at the building where both he and Catherine had faced judgment, she for abusing her position of trust, he for breaking the law to expose her. Sometimes, he said, remembering Margaret's words, the system needs someone willing to break it to expose its flaws. Alina smiled. And sometimes, those who break it can help rebuild it stronger. Jake nodded, facing forward again, toward redemption, toward purpose. Let's get to work.